Imagine trying to run a massive, complex, modern software update on a piece of hardware that is, I don't know, maybe 300,000 years old.
Right, the system just lags completely.
Exactly. The fans overheat, you get constant error codes, and eventually the whole thing just crashes. And when we look at modern romance, marriage, and just the sheer amount of relationship anxiety we deal with today, well, there is a compelling argument that we're doing exactly that.
Yeah, we're trying to run this 10,000-year-old cultural software patch.
Right, the patch of strict lifelong monogamy.
Yes, running that on an evolutionary hard drive that was just never designed to support it. That tension between our biological hardware and our cultural software is arguably the source of immense psychological suffering.
Really is.
I mean, if you are listening to this and you've ever felt a pang of jealousy or, felt profound guilt over a fleeting attraction to someone outside your relationship, the default assumption is that your biology is failing you.
That you're doing something wrong.
Exactly. But the material we are analyzing today argues the exact opposite. Your biology isn't failing. It's actually functioning precisely as it was engineered to do over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution.
And exploring that engineering is our mission today for this deep dive. We are pulling from a massive, comprehensive, Ultra Master Edition analysis suite of the 2010 book Sex at Dawn.
Right, by the evolutionary psychologist Christopher Ryan and psychiatrist Cacilda Jethá.
Yeah, and this isn't just a summary of the text. This suite includes a visual storyboard breakdown, an extensive audit of the fierce academic backlash the book received, and even psychological profiles of the readers who loved it.
And of course, the critics who completely tore it apart. Which is vital context because this text operates as a massive disruptor.
It really does. And I want to be clear, our goal here isn't to declare that these authors possess the absolute truth.
No, definitely not. Nor are we here to completely validate the outraged academics who push back against them.
Right. We are just stepping back to impartially map the arguments, the anatomical evidence, and the historical timeline so you can weigh the mechanics of this debate for yourself.
So we should probably establish the baseline the authors are trying to dismantle first.
Okay, let's unpack this. They call this baseline the standard narrative of evolutionary psychology. This is the orthodox scientific model that basically claims men and women evolved with fundamentally competing reproductive agendas.
Like they're locked in a perpetual state of negotiation.
Exactly.
The standard narrative dictates that a man is biologically driven to seek out youth, fertility, and health in a mate.
To maximize the spread of his genes.
Right. But crucially, because he needs to invest resources to ensure those offspring survive, he demands future sexual fidelity. He requires what they call paternity certainty.
He needs a biological guarantee that he isn't expending his calories and risking his life to raise another man's genetic legacy.
Precisely. And the female agenda in this standard narrative operates as, well, the mirror image.
Because a woman is investing massive physical resources into pregnancy and breastfeeding. She is highly vulnerable during this period.
Right. Therefore, she evaluates a mate based on his wealth, his social status, and his physical ability to protect her. She's trading her reproductive exclusivity for his guaranteed provision.
The resulting compromise is the monogamous pair bond. But notice the inherent fragility of that bond.
Oh, it's incredibly fragile. Under the standard narrative, the relationship is basically a high-stakes security state.
Right. The woman remains hypervigilant toward any signs of emotional infidelity, terrified he might divert his resources to another female.
And the man remains hypervigilant against sexual infidelity, terrified of losing his paternity certainty. Both are just continuously fighting the temptation to stray.
Him to spread cheap sperm, and her to upgrade to better genetics during ovulation. It makes human romance sound less like a beautiful biological imperative and more like a highly stressful corporate merger.
A merger where both CEOs are constantly auditing the books because they suspect the other is embezzling funds?
Exactly. It paints a picture of our ancestors living in a perpetual state of resource guarding and just profound anxiety.
But Ryan and Jethá argue that this high-anxiety corporate merger model is actually a massive scientific projection.
They coined a great term for this, didn't they?
Yeah, Flintstonization. They use this to describe the phenomenon where anthropologists and evolutionary biologists, who largely grew up in patriarchal, capitalist, property-owning societies, have simply projected their own modern, suburban anxieties backward.
Backward onto prehistoric hunter-gatherers. I mean, assuming that early humans lived in anxious, property-guarding nuclear families is about as historically rigorous as assuming Fred Flintstone drove a car with stone wheels.
It completely ignores the actual mechanics of how humans survived during the Pleistocene epoch.
That vast stretch of time encompassing hundreds of thousands of years before the invention of agriculture.
Right. The authors point to the environment of evolutionary adaptedness. During the Pleistocene, humans lived in small, highly mobile, egalitarian bands.
Population density was incredibly low. Storing food or accumulating wealth was physically impossible because they were constantly on the move.
So survival didn't depend on hoarding. It depended absolutely on fierce, uncompromising sharing.
They shared the meat from the hunt, they shared defense against predators, and they shared the burden of childcare. But Ryan and Jethá dropped the paradigm-shifting claim right here.
Right, they argue early humans also shared sexual partners.
Because in an environment with no private property and communal child-rearing, paternity certainty was completely irrelevant.
And taking that further, if you remove the economic necessity of identifying the biological father, the intense evolutionary pressure for mate guarding just evaporates.
The authors draw heavy mechanistic comparisons to bonobos here, don't they?
Yes, bonobos, which, alongside chimpanzees, are our closest living primate relatives. In bonobo societies, sexual interaction isn't a scarce, commodified resource.
It is incredibly frequent, highly varied, and basically functions as social glue.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The mechanics of that social glue are fascinating. Bonobos use sexual contact to reduce group tension, to preemptively resolve conflicts over food, and to build reciprocal trust.
And the text argues our ancestors utilized playful, non-reproductive sexual interactions in the exact same way. It wasn't about securing a biological legacy.
No, it was about integrating the community. We can actually observe echoes of this in certain modern hunter-forager groups that manage to resist agricultural integration.
Like the ones mentioned in the Amazon, right?
Exactly. The source material highlights the anthropological reality of partible paternity found in some indigenous societies. In these cultures, there is a fundamental biological belief that a single act of intercourse is not enough to create a child.
They believe fetal development requires the accumulated semen of multiple men over time, which is wild to think about from a modern perspective.
It is, but the biological mechanism they believe in dictates their social structure. If a woman has multiple sexual partners during her pregnancy, every single one of those men is recognized as the legitimate biological father of that child.
So they all share the social expectation of providing meat and protection for that specific offspring.
Yes. And from an evolutionary survival standpoint, it is a brilliant strategy.
Because in an incredibly harsh environment with high adult mortality rates, a child with one father is highly vulnerable.
Right. A child with 3 or 4 invested fathers has a drastically higher statistical chance of reaching adulthood. The community's social equilibrium depends on diffusing paternity, not concentrating it.
Which fundamentally re-engineers how we have to think about human emotions. I mean, if sex is shared freely to build trust, and multiple men are socially required to raise a child together, the primal panic of jealousy must have operated completely differently.
Exactly. Jealousy in those egalitarian bands wouldn't be triggered by sexual exclusivity, but rather by someone failing to share or someone hoarding a resource.
Okay, so anthropological theories and primate comparisons are intriguing, but where is the physical, anatomical proof to back up this prehistoric swinging lifestyle?
What's fascinating here is how the authors move beyond anthropological theory and primate behavior. We cannot observe our Pleistocene ancestors directly, but we can audit the evolutionary artifacts they left behind in our own bodies.
Right, the physical evidence.
The text meticulously weaves together disparate anatomical clues to argue that strict, lifelong monogamy physically contradicts human biology.
If the anthropological record suggests we shared mates, our physical anatomy should reflect that exact same history of moderate promiscuity. Let's look at sexual dimorphism, the evolutionary size difference between males and females.
Right. If you examine a highly polygynous species like the silverback gorilla, the dominant male fights physically to control exclusive sexual access to a harem of females.
The evolutionary energy cost of that system is enormous. The males evolved to be massive, aggressive, and sometimes twice the size of the females simply to fight off competing males.
But human men and women display relatively low sexual dimorphism. The size difference is roughly 15 to 20%.
That anatomical parity strongly suggests that in our evolutionary past, violent physical male-to-male competition over exclusive mating rights was incredibly rare. Our ancestors weren't fighting to the death for a harem.
The physical evidence goes much deeper when we analyze reproductive anatomy, specifically the metrics of sperm competition.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
It's wild. In species where a female mates with only one male, like gorillas, the male doesn't face any competition inside the female's reproductive tract. Consequently, gorillas have remarkably small testicles relative to their massive body weight.
They simply don't need to produce high volumes of sperm.
Exactly. But chimpanzees operate on the extreme other end of that spectrum. They live in highly promiscuous multi-male, multi-female groups.
Right, a female chimp will mate with dozens of males.
So to ensure their genetics are passed on, male chimps evolved massive testicles to flood the zone, essentially outnumbering the sperm of their rivals.
And human anatomy sits firmly in the middle. Human testicles are significantly larger than a gorilla's, but smaller than a chimpanzee's.
The authors argue this is a definitive biological indicator of a moderately promiscuous past. We evolved for an environment where females frequently mated with multiple partners within a short time frame.
Forcing the sperm of different men to compete microscopically. The source material details how the literal physical shape of human anatomy is engineered for this exact scenario.
Right. The human penis, specifically the pronounced coronal ridge, is uniquely shaped compared to other primates.
Research suggests it evolved to function as a biological vacuum. During the thrusting at intercourse, it is literally designed to plunge in and physically draw out the semen deposited by a previous male rival.
Clearing the way for the new host's sperm. That is an anatomical mechanism that only evolves if females are routinely having sex with multiple men in close succession.
Wow. And the female anatomy provides equally compelling convergent evidence. Consider the mechanism of ovulation.
In the vast majority of primate species, when a female becomes fertile, her body broadcasts it. There are obvious visual swellings and distinct olfactory cues.
But human females evolved hidden ovulation. There are no obvious external signals indicating when a human woman is releasing an egg.
From a mechanistic standpoint, hiding ovulation completely breaks the standard narrative of mate guarding.
If a prehistoric male doesn't know the exact 3-day window when a female is fertile, he cannot effectively guard her just for those days to secure his genetic legacy.
He would have to guard her constantly, which is physically impossible in a foraging society where everyone must gather food.
Precisely. Hidden ovulation serves an incredible evolutionary function. It prevents a single dominant male from monopolizing a female.
It encourages continuous, non-reproductive mating throughout the entire cycle. It allows a female to mate with multiple partners in the band, ensuring that no single male can be absolutely certain he is the father.
Which circles right back to securing communal support for her eventual offspring. The text even explores female copulatory vocalization.
Right, the fact that human women naturally vocalize during sexual intimacy.
In other primate species that exhibit this behavior, it serves a specific evolutionary signaling function. It alerts other nearby males that a mating event is occurring, actively drawing them in to participate.
Thereby increasing the genetic diversity of the sperm competition. By synthesizing all these biological markers, from the vacuum mechanics of the human anatomy to the social engineering of hidden ovulation, the authors present a pretty compelling case.
That our bodies are simply not built for the isolated, exclusive pair bonds we force ourselves into today. But if our physical hardware is optimized for communal affection, and our Pleistocene ancestors survived through shared intimacy, what caused the system crash?
How do we end up in a modern society defined by strict marriage contracts, intense jealousy, and the nuclear family?
The system crash, according to the text, was the agricultural revolution.
Right. Roughly 10,000 years ago, human bands stopped foraging and began domesticating plants and animals. This single technological shift completely rewired the operating system of human society.
It acted like a restrictive DRM software lock on human relationships. Suddenly, humans aren't mobile anymore. They are tethered to specific plots of land.
They're building fences, storing grain surpluses, and domesticating herds. For the first time in human history, we see the invention of private property.
And the inevitable byproduct of private property is inheritance. When a man spends his life clearing a field and building a herd, he wants to pass that accumulated wealth down to his genetic descendants when he dies.
Almost overnight in evolutionary time, the concept of paternity certainty shifted from being completely irrelevant to becoming the absolute foundation of economic survival.
To ensure that the child inheriting the farm was actually his, A man had to enact strict control over female sexuality.
The authors argue that women's reproductive capacities essentially became commodified. They became part of the private property system.
Monogamy, therefore, isn't a biological imperative wired into our DNA. It is a cultural and economic construct invented to protect grain silos and land deeds.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains why historical marriage was almost universally treated as an economic transaction between families rather than a romantic biological union.
The intense societal emphasis on female virginity, the severe punishments for female infidelity, the isolation of the nuclear family, these are all adaptations to the economic conditions of agriculture.
So what does this all mean? The mismatch theory here is profound.
And we should clarify, the authors are not advocating that everyone abandon their partnerships or that infidelity is ethically justified.
No, not at all. They are trying to explain the source of our psychological friction. We are demanding that our bodies and our minds conform to an economic property arrangement that only existed for the last fraction of our evolutionary timeline.
They want to relieve the heavy burden of shame. If you struggle with the confines of lifelong exclusivity, it doesn't mean you are broken or morally deficient.
It means you are a biological organism experiencing the friction of an unnatural environment. By understanding the origins of that friction, we can make more honest, conscious decisions about how we structure our relationships today.
But disrupting the foundational myths of human society does not happen in a vacuum. The final section of our analysis suite dives into the massive ideological war this book triggered.
Oh, absolutely. When Sex at Dawn was published, it cracked the cultural zeitgeist wide open.
The divide was stark. In the popular sphere, it was embraced as a revelation. It climbed the New York Times bestseller list.
Dan Savage, the prominent sex advice columnist, championed it as the most important paradigm shift in sexuality since the Kinsey Reports. Readers described feeling a profound sense of liberation.
Like a lifetime of unexplained relationship anxiety had finally been diagnosed, but the academic establishment launched a brutal counteroffensive.
Christopher Ryan himself acknowledges that he initially submitted the manuscript to Oxford University Press, where it was firmly rejected during the peer review process.
Scholars across the fields of evolutionary biology and anthropology accuse the authors of prioritizing a compelling narrative over scientific rigor.
The source material details a particularly sharp critique from anthropologist Ryan Ellsworth. Ellsworth systematically accused Ryan and Jethá of cherry-picking data.
He argued they amplified the evidence of partible paternity in a few specific Amazonian tribes, while completely ignoring the vast anthropological data showing widespread jealousy, pair bonding, and mate guarding in hundreds of other hunter-gatherer societies.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate here. If the authors failed a blind peer review at a major university press, and field experts are proving they selectively ignored contradicting evidence, shouldn't we view Sex at Dawn less as scientifically settled fact, and more as a highly provocative philosophical thought experiment?
That is a highly valid interpretation, and the critics utilize the naturalistic fallacy to reinforce that exact point.
Right. The naturalistic fallacy is the logical error of assuming that just because something is natural or occurred in our evolutionary past, it is inherently good or desirable for modern humans.
Because, infant mortality rates of 50% were entirely natural during the Pleistocene. Dying of a tooth infection was natural.
Exactly. But we actively use science, culture, and technology to overcome those natural baselines because we decided they cause unnecessary suffering.
The critics argue that even if our ancestors engaged in widespread promiscuity, we shouldn't necessarily use Pleistocene survival tactics as a blueprint for modern emotional ethics.
Furthermore, intersectional critics pointed out the book's intense heteronormative bias. It largely frames human evolution entirely around male-female reproductive mechanics, often utilizing queer behavior merely as biological footnotes rather than central human experiences.
Ryan has publicly defended the text against these academic assaults. He insists the scientific establishment misunderstood the core mission of the book.
He states they were never trying to prove humans are exact, carbon copies of bonobos living in a utopian sexual free-for-all.
Their goal was simply to shatter the monopoly of the standard narrative. They wanted to prove that prehistoric human sexuality was vastly more fluid and varied than the restrictive, property-obsessed model we've been sold.
This ideological battleground is brilliantly mapped out in the Character Psychology Analysis Pack, included in our sources. It profiles the different psychological archetypes drawn to this debate.
You have the authors operating as paradigm challengers, outsiders who are willing to aggressively push boundaries and perhaps overstate their case in order to crack the foundation of an entrenched establishment.
Opposing them are the disciplined skeptics, the academics who refuse to let compelling storytelling bypass the rigorous, methodical demands of the scientific method. They protect the integrity of the data, even if the data doesn't tell a fun story.
This raises an important question for you, the listener, as you process all of this. The analysis pack also profiles the audience.
Are you naturally an enthusiastic convert? Someone who feels suffocated by traditional societal norms and is eager to adopt new frameworks that validate your desire for freedom?
Or are you a cautious consumer? Someone who finds these evolutionary theories fascinating, but demands a much higher burden of empirical proof before you dismantle the structural foundations of your own life.
Let's pull all these threads together. We started by dismantling the standard narrative of the high-anxiety, resource-guarding evolutionary couple.
We explored the radical counter-theory that early human survival depended on the communal sharing of food, childcare, and intimacy.
We audited the biological hardware, from the vacuum mechanics of sperm displacement to the social engineering of hidden ovulation, which suggests our bodies remember a vastly different past.
We examined the argument that the agricultural revolution and the invention of private property forced an unnatural economic software patch onto that biology, demanding paternity certainty and strict monogamy.
And finally, we navigated the fierce academic backlash that accuses this entire theory of being a cherry-picked, romanticized fantasy.
A prominent reviewer quoted in our source materials summarized the book by saying, well, this book is kind of a mess, but it's a very interesting mess.
And perhaps that is the ultimate takeaway. The value of this deep dive doesn't depend on Christopher Ryan being 100% scientifically flawless.
The value lies in the disruption. It forces you to audit your own baseline assumptions. It challenges you to untangle how much of your relationship expectations are hardwired into your biology and how much is just inherited economic programming from an ancient agricultural society.
Which brings us to a compelling final exercise. The source material outlines a 30-day sexual evolution challenge. Week 1 is entirely dedicated to building awareness of where your cultural beliefs originate.
But if we expand on that premise, consider the technological moment we're living in right now. The core thesis of the book is that economics and technology dictate human mating strategies.
Agriculture and the concept of physical property invented the monogamous nuclear family 10,000 years ago. But we are no longer living in an agricultural society.
We are rapidly accelerating into a digital, post-industrial, globally connected era.
Our entire concept of property is changing. Our concept of community is no longer bound by physical geography.
The economic realities of how we survive, how we work, and how we connect are shifting faster than at any point since the invention of the plow.
If a technological shift 10,000 years ago completely rewrote the rules of human sexuality, is it possible we are currently living through the exact moment where an entirely new standard narrative is being coded for the next 10,000 years?
It forces you to look at the traditional institutions we cling to and wonder which parts will survive the update and which parts will become obsolete code.
It changes everything about how you view the world around you.
Because the next time you see that perfectly manicured suburban lawn with the stark white picket fence, you might realize the fence isn't actually there to protect what's inside. It's a psychological tool we built to convince ourselves that the wild, chaotic jungle of human nature was never there to begin with. Keep questioning the code you're running on.